All right, let's try that again. So is AI going to destroy you and everything that you love? Probably not. You're not going to wake up as a human battery for a legion of AI-powered robots. But there is a lot to understand about artificial intelligence, and it's in everything now. You'll note that it's even becoming a marketing gimmick as much as it is a feature. We're going to discuss this in some detail in this lecture. It's largely offering automation like we see in robotics in the realm of information. So next slide here. So what is intelligence in Judaism? It's important to understand what Judaism defines as human intelligence. The word in Hebrew is binah. It comes from the shoresh ben yod nun, which is also used in the verb habin, to understand. Now, in Bereshit, note how often Bain appears with variations on separate, vayavdil, navdil in Hebrew, our creation story. So God's act of creation consists largely of separation and contrast, day and night, heavens and earth, water and land, and God judges it to be good. Vayar Elohim kitov. We thus can infer from the creation story alone that our ability to distinguish between what is good and what is not connotes intelligence, and specifically what makes us in God's image. I think this implication is a little more simple than a lot of, we could delve into the tree and all that stuff, but I think this is the simplest definition of intelligence that we can find in Judaism. So how does that relate to AI? You see here, we have our famous story of the Golem of Prague. The Maharal of Prague created a being out of clay to serve and protect the Jewish community. Typically, the stories of the golem drawn from the creation account in the mystical Sefer Yetzirah involve Prague or some other place and the creation of a construct to protect the Jews from anti-Semitic attacks, particularly the blood libel. The golem is always capable, but he lacks free will. The golem is clearly intelligent enough to follow instructions because it can interpret those from its creators, but those commands have to be carefully rendered, or the golem, who has no ability to judge what is good, will carry them out without any thought of what's right and what's wrong. So we embed the same apprehensions we do in Jewish folklore in our approach to AI, for right or for wrong. The golem as an amoral construct reflects our flaws back at us. The same we see is generally true of AI. You don't need Skynet to build an army of robotic terminators when the bias implicit in our systems is in the data we use to train artificial intelligence. I'm not afraid of robotic Arnold Schwarzeneggers. I am afraid of AI failures and the death by 1,000 cuts that comes as we implement it rapidly at scale, and we'll talk about that. One of the common things that I see when I was doing my research on this is that personhood is constantly discussed in relationship to AI and the theological Jewish questions about it. It's tempting to ruminate on, is AI a person? Because of our folklore and our tradition and the easy parallel between creator and created. It's kind of a superficial question right now because it's unmatched by the technology. It's getting ahead of our skis, so to speak. There is no system that produces AI that can take data, make its own subjective determinations, and act. It's just not achievable right now, in part because we can't duplicate how it occurs in humans. Everything you see in AI has right now, it has as its basis a mathematical algorithm or sets of mathematical algorithms. So the person, it's just not sentient yet, so it's not worth talking about. But we do have real pressing concerns that reflect the present state of AI that warrant a theological treatment. But in order to get there, we have to define what AI is. The Oxford Dictionary says that the theory and development of computer systems able to perform tasks that normally require human intelligence, such as visual perception, speech recognition, and translation between languages. The goal is to create intelligent machines that can work and think like humans and even surpass humans in some cases. In order to get there, we need a couple of things. So we need a neural network. And what is a neural network? In machine learning, a neural network is a model inspired by the structure and function of biological neural networks in animal brains. So we're trying to simulate how animal brains react to data and process data. Digital computers started off operating explicit instructions in a linear manner. So you'd have do this, then do this. If this condition is met, do this. If it doesn't get met, do this. And it did that via access to readable and writable memory with a number of processors. This is known as the von Neumann architecture. And if you watched Oppenheimer, I don't remember if von Neumann appeared in it, but he was involved in the Manhattan Project. Neural networks, on the other hand, model information processing like our brains do through a framework of connectionism. The major difference between this and regular computing is it doesn't separate memory from computation. So, and it can perform many operations in parallel, like when you do your homework and you'd listen to music at the same time. That's kind of how neural networks work. I won't get into how they're implemented in hardware and software, but that's what differentiates them between the computer sitting on your desktop. It's neither here nor there, really, but it's important to know that this is a kind of computing that's available in your phones. If any of you have an iPhone right now that's older than like the iPhone 8, Apple builds in these now what's called the Apple Neural Engine, and they've scaled tremendously since 2017. My little phone here, made in 2020, can perform 11 trillion little operations simultaneously in a second. This computer that I'm running this slideshow on can perform like 18 or 16 trillion operations per second. That's profound, and we'll get into why that's important here in a bit. Machine learning. This is the use and development of computer systems that are able to learn and adapt without following explicit instructions by using algorithms and statistical models to analyze and draw inferences from patterns and data. This is how we train artificial intelligence. We take these massive sets of data and process it with neural networks, and I'm simplifying it a little bit in order for these things to make determinative logic. The preponderance of my work in artificial intelligence has been involved in this with two objectives. It's to classify data based on models which we've developed, and the other purpose is to make predictions for future outcomes using those models. We do this a lot in healthcare. It's important to keep this term in mind because it underpins a lot about everything about AI. And you're going to hear the term modeling and models a lot tonight. From statistics, did anybody here take college statistics? I'm sorry if you did. Maybe you remember that the axiom, all models are wrong, but some are useful. There are circumstances where our models are wrong. I'm modeling readmission to hospitalization risk using a couple of different vectors right now. Recent hospitalization, social determinants of health like culture and diet, current medication profiles, and more. It's wrong in that it's potentially incomplete. We may not have a complete picture of why somebody might be at risk to be readmitted to the hospital. We also use a proxy metric, which I'll explain later. Readmission itself, which it's an imperfect measure for the model. So we have a hard time measuring the effectiveness of the model over time. We use it anyway because it still has bearing on preventative healthcare. And that's there's something in Jewish thought. Rabbi probably reads a lot of them, but Yuval Harari said that the real test of knowledge is not truth, but utility. Well, the knowledge is still useful that we gain from these models, even if they're imperfect. And there is a large problem in the rapidity of our advancements right now with artificial intelligence, and an unsolved issue in machine learning that we're constantly working on. It gives me nightmares, and I'll talk about it later. Deep learning is a type of machine learning, and it's important to understand this because it kind of feeds into where we're going with it. It uses these artificial neural networks in which multiple layers of processing. So it'll run over this data more and more and more to extract progressively higher level features from data. The best current example I can give to you of this is there was a huge big bang of hardware in 2009, 2010. We used, if you've heard of the company NVIDIA, they're trading really good right now. So if you're looking for a good stock option, invest in NVIDIA. Their graphics processing units, they graphics cards and computers process a lot of data. And we discovered that they could be used for Bitcoin mining. We could use them for AI training. And that's what we did. We started doing these deep learning neural networks out of graphic processing units in 2009. This exponentially expanded the capacity for faster training of artificial intelligence. This big leap forward doesn't sound like much, but we are able to take large medical images and do cancer detection with them. More relevant to you, how many of you use Siri or a digital assistant like Alexa? Well, where was that in 2007 when the iPhone was released, right? Well, that was only possible because of the kind of speech recognition that was enabled by the deep learning that took place circa 2009, 2010. And I mentioned those Apple neural engines that are in your phone. That's derivative of the technology that you find in the graphics processing units. So we think of it now as so commonplace, so ubiquitous already, but the capabilities of digital assistants are really a recent innovation as a result of deep learning. So you've probably all heard of Chat GPT or DALI. One of the things that this form of uh, AI program is called a large language model. It's a type of AI program that can recognize and generate text, among other things. LLMs are trained on huge sets of data using machine learning and deep learning. And they use natural language processing to understand and generate human-like language outputs. And so if you've seen the stuff that's generated with Chat GPT, the rabbi likes to post some really cool stuff on his Facebook wall. It's really funny a lot of times. And it uses a kind of neural network called a transformer model. It encodes and decodes language values so the large language model can analyze and understand text by paying attention to how words and phrases relate to each other in a sequence. It's a lot more complex than that, I promise, but that's the reductive definition. So you've heard of generative AI at this point. You've heard of Chat GPT, and generative AI is the most common AI that you're hearing about right now. Uh, generative AI is fueling the nightmares of creative people because it can produce art, writing. For my field, it can produce software development, fashion patterns. But because of the nature of how it's trained, what it generates is often more derivative than just about anything you can find. Some of our fears aren't just putting people with fine arts degrees out of work. It's the use of deep fake technology to further deepen exposure to fake news. Towards that end, and we'll get to this tonight, it relates to anti-Semitism and Holocaust denial. Uh, Anybody tell me what lo tignov means? Lo tignov? Thou shalt not steal, right? Did I pronounce that right? I think I did. It absolutely applies to non-material thefts because creative ideas still have a monetary value. Generative AI leads to sourcing without attribution, which is theft according to Jewish law. A further food for thought, whoever repeats a statement in the name of one who said it brings redemption to the world. We have this concept, Beshem Omro, we are commanded by our rabbis to speak ideas in the name of those who spoke them. AI has real problems with that when you use generative AI. Predictive AI, and actually it's easier for me to explain predictive AI based on the systems that I've worked on here. AI models can outperform physicians in radiology diagnostic accuracy. We're getting to the point where a reading radiologist could be replaced by artificial intelligence. You know, there's some jokes that somebody said this would happen by 2016, and it keeps getting pushed out and pushed out. But it's here. The technology is there. It's just a matter of making it available and implementing it. We can predict cardiac events based off of data collected from internet-connected glucosameters, in scales, and cardiac rhythm management units that are connected to the internet. We can tell you with pretty good accuracy when you're primed for a cardiac arrest. We can automate accurate predictions of chronic kidney disease, and we are doing that. We can assess and predict the quality of care gaps. You get care gaps in Medicare coverage. You know, we help them hone these things. But one of the things we've run into with training predictive AI is our own psychological phenomenon called hindsight bias. So if you think of it this way, we tend to analyze our understanding of the appropriate response to something like the sinking of the Titanic based off of data points that we established after the boat collided with the iceberg. Would we know anything, like, would we know how many life rafts we needed until we collided with an iceberg? No. But we tend to take the same approach with artificial intelligence. We give it all of the data that would not have been available at the point relevant to decision making, and we train AI with it. And we tend to seed it with perfect data, not realistic data. So it's easier to deal with us with predictive AI with numeric features. So if we're doing things like where there's a diagnostic lab score, anything that we can put a number to without having to do any kind of categorization of the data, that's a lot easier for us to use predictive AI with still. When you have to take categorical features like text, you have to vectorize, i.e. assign them numeric values. And then you run into issues with dilution because those categories aren't readily apparent to training models for AI. Oh, okay. Uh-huh. There we go. Thank you. Um, so yeah, it's nerdy. I apologize, but that is what predictive AI is. And the final part of our definition of AI is understanding AI by capability and function. So we have on the left side of this little diagram, and it might be too small to read even on the screen. The capability side, these are the general intelligence capabilities of AI. These are the what broad categories of like where it stands on the scale of uh, how much it can do. And then we have the functional implementations of AI, which is how AI actually works. Yeah, let's see if I can. Is that there we go. So the capabilities are artificial narrow intelligence or narrow AI is geared towards a specific objective. This is like Siri or Alexa, your digital assistants, autonomous driving systems. As complex as they are, this form of AI is constrained to a narrow band of functions. It only does one thing. It's not like that movie with what's it back in the day where the trucks and the lawnmowers try to kill people. That can't happen because the narrow AI only has a specific set of functions. Uh, another one. All right. This is hard to work with. Oh, it's because it's zoomed. Gosh. Technology. I wasn't prepared for people to be showing up. Let's see if I can zoom out and then I can do this. There we go. There's so much. It decided to stop working. There we go. Oh, this is awful. I should assign somebody else host duties. Ah, I guess I can't. Oh, I don't know what happened to my mouse. This is awful. Yeah, this is. Yeah, that's right. See AI. This is it. It's taking my stuff over. Okay.
Are you trying to get back to the diet?
Yeah, I'm trying to get back to anything. It's just not working. Oh, this is so frustrating. Let me see if I can fix this for a sec. There we go. All right. Now I'll try again. I'm going to share my screen. All right. All right. Go back to this. All right, guys. I apologize, viewers at home. All right. Let's see here. Okay. There we go. So now we have let's see. Yeah, I'm not gonna mess with it again. I'll just describe the things. So artificial general intelligence is the next one and that's the kind of AI that in theory is capable of performing tasks on par with a biological human. It's a cognitive AI, which means it kind of thinks, even if it's still in an early stage of development. It can evaluate and process all sorts of data in order to act accordingly. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Oh, oh yeah, the closed circuit. Yeah, there we go. Um, Artificial superintelligence is still theoretical. This would be able to perform any activity better than humans without replicating our behavior. It would be autonomous, and that's the stuff dystopian nightmare. Uh, we shift to the right with the functionalities. Let me see if I can do this without breaking this. Reactive machines are the most basic implementation of artificial intelligence. They have a certain range of reactions for specific requests. Deep Blue, the chess playing computer, is a good example of this. It was able to recognize figures on a chessboard and process 200 million moves in 1 second. It had no concept of past actions, i.e., no memory, and ignored everything but the chessboard. Limited memory machines These are still completely reactive to data inputs, but they are able to store past experiences and learn from recent data for short and limited periods of time. You see this kind of AI in cars, which analyze speed, direction, and spatial relationships. Facial recognition is another example of limited memory AI. Okay. They're gonna have to wait a second. Theory of mind. This is like and still in its infancy, but this form of artificial intelligence is reactive to humans, how humans think and feel. So it'll read your tone of voice or look for micro expressions and facial expressions. Self-awareness is the most ambitious of artificial intelligence goals. And you see that a lot of these can all overlap with the different capabilities of AI, but this one most applies to general and super AI. It's a horizon for many scientists. A self-aware machine would be able to store past data, create its own judgments, and act accordingly. It is so far not attainable with present technology. So that puts my mind at ease a little bit. And let me go admit this person here, if I can, without breaking it. Oh gosh. Where's the meeting? And there we go. Can't find the meeting. Gosh, I tell you, it's always something. Here we go. Admit. Okay. So hopefully is that still sharing it? Saying sharing at the top? Good. All right. So I want to cap our definitions with a real world example of machine learning that was both revelatory and disquieting to me when I worked on it and subverted my assumptions about the superiority of digital decision making. In the late 1990s, early 2000s, I worked on a tool to score an individual's likelihood to reoffend in the criminal justice system. It would have been used in sentencing, parole, probation, determining release conditions at varying points throughout a criminal case. It would be transparent because we could highlight every factor in weighing the score. We trained it using sentencing data, release data, reoffending matrices, and more. We used a person's docket history if we had it. Back then, they weren't all digitized in Pennsylvania like they are now. It was rooted in Pennsylvania statutes and sentencing guidelines, and it used statistics on crimes and the percentage of folks who are paroled versus serving full sentences for specific crimes. As pure as our data was, scoring was uniformly higher for urban offenders in Philadelphia or Allegheny County, Harrisburg too, particularly for those who were Black. It wasn't obvious what the problem was when we looked at what the training data we had for our machine learning system, until we realized that we took as a neutral factor summary offense data. So summary offenses are often driven by nuisance ordinances. They're a staple of gentrification and broken windows policing. Non-juvenile summary offenses are often considered in first-time sentencing in Pennsylvania for misdemeanors and felonies. Additionally, with some summary offenses, they actually violate parole. So summary offenses occur with greater frequency in urban settings because of population density, poverty dynamics, and revenue dependencies. So consider, if you look at your municipal budget and you see a revenue bucket depending on parking enforcement, that's actually a vector and an entry point into the criminal justice system for the disenfranchised. So how do you offset this? The problems here reflected our systemic flaws back at us. We never moved this beyond prototyping because we couldn't solve for this problem. To me, as a Jew believing in justice you should pursue, the answer is a human judge imbued with compassion and an understanding of our flaws should handle sentencing. And that's hit or miss too, because we get their implicit biases. But what it says to me about AI is this is a societal question and not an artificial intelligence one, but one we need to strongly consider keeping AI out of until we can resolve, because the training data for the AI is going to be broken. Yeah, if they come, yeah. Okay. Let's see here. All right. Oh, it's a classmate. So all right. So AI is calling you from inside the house. Your world is already inundated with AI. Even as I make this slide in PowerPoint, Office was using AI to make design recommendations about how this slide should look, greatly augmenting my rather poor PowerPoint skills. You'd get a cat pushing a watermelon out of a lake if I did this myself. So your car, I'm not going to play this video because it's redundant. Your car is a great video example of AI. My wife's got a 2023 Prius now. It doesn't have full AI driving, but it has this very comprehensive driver assistance. It detects spatial relations to other cars, pedestrians, and objects, and it analyzes the car's position on the road and offers steering corrections. It even has its cruise control has like an adaptive feature where it detects the speed of surrounding traffic and adjusts speed accordingly. This is all AI. But more commonly, if you had a car built in the last 20 years, your transmission control unit uses AI to improve the efficiency of your gear shifting. Far more capable and efficient than the old speed RPM-based calculations the original automobiles did with automatic transmissions. Let's avoid this video. So your phone, the compute power in your phone is orders of magnitude more voluminous than the luggable CPM machine that I had and learned how to program on in 1983. I still have one. And for all its size, like many 8-bit computers, it was hobbled when it came to floating point math. And if you don't know what floating point representation is, that's how computers relate to real numbers, not integers, but like anything with infinite decimal precision. That's how computers interact with them. You need real numbers for AI to train AI because everything boils down to a numeric representation of data. The more precise the number, the more compute's required. So if I wanted to do serious computation back in the 1980s with my CPM machine that was the size of a sewing machine, I needed a math coprocessor. That phone in your pocket is more powerful than anything that existed in the 1980s, including mainframes, Cray, CDC, IBM, whatever. Every second behind the scenes, inferences made by neural networks on your phone are helping you translate languages, take better photos. If you have an Apple Watch or a Fitbit, they're monitoring your health status. This is why, in spite of AI concepts existing for a very long time, we couldn't do a lot of it, and we still can't do a lot of it until the technology catches up. Your finances are another area where you intersect with AI a lot without knowing it. Anytime you have a fraud detection algorithm triggered, that's usually AI. Perfect example. My middle kid, Avi, is attending university in Tokyo, Japan. Using their checking account, they triggered fraud detection algorithms when they first moved there because the account was stood up in Maine. They used their debit card of point of purchase everywhere here. Then they go over there and their usage patterns not just vary in geography, but also she's going to the ATM machine now. And that triggered the fraud detection algorithms. And it was great. And if you ever done mobile deposits with your phone and a check, AI is used in the processing of photos and the checks for fraud detection there. It's pretty cool. In manufacturing, artificial intelligence is being used to duplicate the design process of engineers. It used to be that prototyping, you'd hope for the best, make a couple of prototypes and go for it. Well, now you can virtually model and test hundreds of design options, replacing that very labor-intensive part of product engineering. It can be used to forecast raw material prices. One of the areas I designed some. Now, note, we know that robotics are big in engineering, but AI continues to improve the level of automation that takes place in the manufacturing process in robotics. It's really exciting. So customer service is something where you're going to start seeing more and more of this. Right now, if you get online, it's horrible, right? You get online, right? Oh yeah, and it's only going to get worse. Because you're going to start you're already speaking to computer-generated customer service representatives. They're going to be wholly generated by AI. Their vocal inflection, their ability to solve rote and even more complex problems is astonishing. We just implemented a chat feature on our patient portal. Right now, it can only handle appointment rescheduling. So it's kind of low-end AI. But we're going to be expanding it to where it's offering a basic level of consulting care. You've got your entire medication profile. This thing can replace a pharmacist and make it, I'm a little nervous about this, but you can make advice about what medication combinations you should avoid. But this is a good segue into the final segment of where AI is already present. And it's close to my heart because it's what I work on. Healthcare is the one area where it's most beneficial to the human condition. Similar to engineering capabilities, AI is developing new possible medication combinations in ways that, you can get right to clinical testing faster. It's improving diagnosis. It's increasing access to care for wide swaths of underserved communities. In my world, I've worked with accountable care organizations to take utilization data from Medicare and Medicaid and hone targets for specific areas that are underserved. I've developed predictive AI algorithms to identify precursors to immediate cardiac arrest. I talked about that. Currently, I'm working on AI that will improve social determinants of health, as well as monitoring incoming data to prevent hospitalization during stage 4 chronic kidney disease or end stage renal disease. And we work with health information exchange data to identify at-risk groups for chronic kidney disease so we can get them into better preventative care with their primary care providers sooner. It's really exciting. So consider this. I come from central Pennsylvania where radon is off the hook. Never mind 3 Mile Island. I grew up 2 miles from 3 Mile Island and I'm perfectly okay. But AI gives us the ability to develop very granular predictions about these environmental influences on health for specific populations. Coal country in Kentucky, the influence of poor diet and food insecure areas. Flint, Michigan. We can take these populations, take their healthcare data, and look for big patterns in things that we're going to have to do specifically for those areas in preventative care. It's not a political point that I'm making here, but one of the few good things I can say about our healthcare system is the profit motive combined with AI offers real potential to improve access to care and better outcomes. And when you combine it with the acceleration of capabilities, you can do in-home care with non-specialized providers that you couldn't do with even the range of specialized. How many nephrologists are in the state of Maine? I don't know, but I'm sure it's a handful. If I can replace nephrologists with AI or limit the amount of exposure, I can put more nephrology type diagnosis in front of people if I don't have nephrologists. It's good stuff. I mean, some people are apprehensive about it, but the technology is only going to get better. So we'll go into the history of artificial intelligence, and I'll keep it brief because I know everybody's tired of this already. So I use here the image from Fritz Lang's Metropolis. In the cultural zeitgeist of the early 20th century, artificially intelligent robots began to creep into science fiction. With life imitating art in this area, scientists, mathematicians, and philosophers began postulating how artificial intelligence could be realized. You've all heard of Alan Turing. Maybe you've seen the Imitation Game. He believed that since humans could use all available information combined with reason to solve problems and make decisions, machines could do the same thing. And his 1950 paper, it's worth a read, Computer Machinery Intelligence, outlined how we could build machines to think and then how we could test them. And, maybe you think like I do, the fictionalized version of the Turing test in the movie Blade Runner. Can an evaluator discern machine responses from human responses? Well, right now we're at the point where you can't in a lot of areas. We're seeing the deep fakes. We're seeing the generative AI that creates things that we cannot distinguish from something that is organic. If we could conceive of it in the 1950s, we still couldn't see it through to fruition. Generally, what computers were available back then, like INAC and whatever, they could execute programs or a set of instructions, but they had no storage capability. And that's crucial because they could not store results. They could not build on information produced by their own processes and use them for follow-on processes. And that's important. But even if we had storage capabilities in the 1950s, computational limitations hampered development of AI. Talking about our phone capabilities earlier, converting learning data to machine relevant numbers, that was impossible with the level of processing you had even in the 1980s. So, we have that's just it. The compute power is really caught up finally. But actually, the theory behind large language models goes back even further than 1950s. In 1906, there was this guy named Andrei Markov. Anybody took Russian lit in college? Again, I'm sorry if you did. If you can remember what a Bayer Eugene Onegin is, Andrei Markov took 20,000 letters and created what we now know as Markov chains. In layperson's terms, it's a mathematical system that hops from one state or a value or a set of values to another. So if you wanted to model a baby's behavior using a Markov chain, you would take every state that the baby could exist in: playing, eating, sleeping, crying. Together, they form a state space or a list of all possible states. Markov chains then tell you the probability of hopping or transitioning from one state to another state, i.e., the baby will go from playing to sleeping without crying, or the baby will go to crying from playing. Uh, all of those things. And on this slide, it's really tough to read. There's a transition matrix from his works. Each row will sum to 0, 1. On the vowel line, you see like 0.872 is the probability for a vowel to transition to a consonant, and 1.128 is a probability for a vowel to stay a vowel. So this is a common computer science problem, is creating a probabilistic text generator using Markov chains. Um, I know this is really arcane, but it's, every state within a Markov chain is connected to every other state with varying probabilities. If a baby's crying, a baby can transition from crying to sleep. A baby can transition from eating to sleeping. They would all have transitional lines on this matrix. If you wanted to take the Masoretic Hebrew Torah text, which you could, and introduce it to the concept of a Markov chain, you could create a probabilistic text generator based off the Torah that would write Torah-like things. The probability that Vayomer would be followed by Moshe would be statistically significant, and it would be constant, and it would appear a lot in any probabilistic text you generate using this. So at scale, something this simple can produce very complex tasks because it doesn't have a memory. It simplifies problems without affecting accuracy. It's required learning if you're taking up data science to understand these Markov chains. And I just pointed out because it's old, but it's also very analogous to what large language models are. And there's a lot more to it with modern AI, but that's where it gets started. So large language models play into how machine learning behind ChatGPT can analyze and synthesize data. But what about generative art? Like, what about DALL-E? We have this guy named Harold Cohen, who in the 1970s created his first in a series of software called Aaron. Initially, it just created abstract drawings like you see behind him here in this little picture. He added rocks and plants and people in the 1980s. And in the 1990s, he introduced color. And you can still see a lot of this art in galleries around the world. And he started with the problem statement: what are the minimum conditions under which a set of marks function as an image? And it couldn't learn new styles or imagery on its own. Each new capability had to be introduced in code by him. So he stopped development when he died in 2016, of course. The code will likely never be released, so we don't really know how he did what he did with it. But it's not terrifically different from what we do now with generative art or music AI. With storage and compute power, we can quantize, and that quantizes means we're taking the parameters of the genre, like whether you use sponge paint or brush strokes or oil or whatever, and then turning that into numbers. So we take that existing art and music and their genres and algorithmically produce new materials using that as a basis. And we ask, is it art? And how does it differ from real art? I was considering this the other day. If I took every work of art from the New Hope School and leveraged generative AI to create a brand new pastoral painting of a mill, is that ethically any different than a human painter producing a similarly derivative work of art? It's a question. So finally, ChatGPT, we get through the history of it, bringing us up to current. And this is really condensed because it's a lot of stuff. ChatGPT was designed, as the name implies, a chatbot where you enter a prompt and the system replies, and it's supposed to mimic human conversation. It's all 100% human trained, as in it's not really self-learning or self-training system. The original one was trained using software manual pages. If you're old enough to remember old BBS's, bulletin board systems with the dial-up modems, you use content from those, programming languages, and Wikipedia. But this is what we mean by supervised learning. We feed it the data, a narrow constrained bunch of data. And then we have what's called reinforcement learning with ChatGPT, where we rate the quality of a response, and that helps it understand, whether or not that's a good response. And it is a large language model. It's also, again, not sentient, even if it can mimic sentience, just to be clear. I use ChatGPT pretty extensively at work now for code generation, marketing copy, and we're using generative AI throughout our workflows. It's pretty cool. But this is where I lay awake at night wondering what I have done. ChatGPT generates answers based on patterns in its training data, and it does not check for factual accuracy. It learns from the inherent structure of the text, not external sources of truth. So anything that you're doing, it's only learning from the training data it's given. It doesn't cross-check it with anything outside of that. This can lead to what's called hallucination, where it produces either something completely incoherent or something plausible but horribly wrong. It's a pervasive phenomena in machine learning, and we try to offset this all the time. We can't directly fit the volume of training data to specific models, in part because our models are wrong, as I said before, or they're hard to measure at scale because we're dealing with so much data. So we train the model against a proxy metric. And I mentioned the proxy metric earlier, didn't go into too much detail. A good analogy is a common problem in public education. Our goal is to educate children on specific curriculum, right? We want them to learn these fundamentals, these things. And then the metric we set up for it, since we can't actually really know if a kid has learned and absorbed the curriculum, we measure student and school performance on standardized tests, right? It's called a proxy metric. There's this thing called Goodhart's law. When a measure becomes a target, it ceases to be a good measure. So schools narrowly focus on teaching to tests. Children cheat. They all achieve the target of our proxy metric at the expense of and at odds with the true objective. So we want to teach these kids how to actually learn things. So we want them to absorb curriculum, learn geography, but then we're scoring them on how they answer multiple choice tests. And that's what happens with machine learning. So as we work to improve the outcome based on this proxy metric, it works for a time, but eventually the real goal stops improving. In machine learning, the goal often gets worse. It's an example of what we call overfitting, where the algorithm is so attenuated to the training data that it can't work with new or real world data sets. Alternatively, the model learns too much from the specific details of the data and not enough about the general rules around it. That's your predictive text on your phone. You guys you make a text and you get suggestions of the next word. If you start typing "are Jews," like you want to ask a question about Jews and any of the things with predictive text, and you get evil as an option, well, that's because the volume of data out there normalizes bigotry. It's widely understood facet of training LLMs. I'm sure you guys have all heard it. And we come up with training patterns to offset this, but it's still highly problematic. It's not just bigotry, it's everything that's wrong with the data we're training things with. And it's hard to identify that without actually getting into it and looking at it. And we're continually working to improve. Someone just recently came up with a decent geometric explanation for Goodhart's law as it occurs in Markov decision process. And you see marked improvements between ChatGPT 3 and ChatGPT 4. The next iteration of ChatGPT 5 will be even better, but it still fuels my nightmares. And here's why. We're adopting AI at an astonishing pace to realize greater efficiencies in almost every task imaginable. And we're doing this in a very short period of time. We know, again, that our models are often wrong. We know that our shortcomings in machine learning and the insufficiency of our metrics, we have all this. And on one hand, I'm really excited about this because it's affordable and approachable for a company at my scale to benefit from these capabilities and leverage them on behalf of patients. 10 years ago, we'd have been waiting for Johns Hopkins or Brandeis or Drexel to produce these models, and it would take a year to get them peer reviewed, but they'd be solid. But now we can do them in months, weeks and months. But in our proxy metrics for this, what we're doing is a figure showing that we've reduced hospital readmissions for patients with these conditions. And there will come a point where it stops working or readmissions actually start increasing. And then we know that our model's wrong. But imagine that as one drop in a sea of similar implementations at this insane pace. We're not prepared to deal with massive numbers of what are inevitable, diverse, unwanted side effects. To me, the perfect storm of societal issues means that the more systems break, like AI systems break due to Goodhart's law, the further we'll get from taking collaborative and rational steps to fix them because of like our political climate. Can't have the conversation about anything that's troubling without, these bifurcated sides. Well, how do you deal with something like collapse of AI models and the omnipresence of AI when you have that in background? I'm not one I don't do fear mongering when it comes to AI, except in this avenue. It's a death by a thousand cuts. You get these systemic failures because AI doesn't work here or there. that adds up cumulatively, and we just don't have the bandwidth to solve the problems because we're not prepared. The Jewish ethics of AI. I list some things out here, a top level deal. I just want to mention Rabbi Seamers gave a great sermon a year ago about he will never write a sermon using ChatGPT. He's spoken so well about this topic. And if I can find our digital copy of that from the live stream, I'll put it up. I think folks in a position of public trust, especially clergy, have a social contract against using ChatGPT. But I think most of us probably really should think hard about how often we engage it as we do in our professional careers. But I think about other things like digital surveillance and facial recognition. It's nearly omnipresent. Could digital surveillance be used to supervise kosher dairy production? Could I have a robot mashgiach? Can AI automation be used in place of a Shabbos timer? Can it turn on the lights? Can it prepare your food? Well, that may be an easy one. I think Rabbi Moshe Feinstein said a lot about like automating with Shabbos timers. I think that's still relevant to the use of AI and robotics. But could a robot be trained to do nickor and slaughter? This is removing the large blood vessels, prohibited fat, and the sciatic nerve at the end of slaughter. Could it determine and evaluate GLOT status? Could you automate your shatnez checks? So linen and wool mixed together is verboten for us. Could you automate that using AI? There's a lot it can do. But before we get into that, let's talk about the scary stuff. This button hooks with my concern of a dystopian future where the pace of AI adoption exceeds our ability to manage its growth. There are very obvious problems for us, Jews, when it comes to AI. The first is incidental, related to problems with training data. Widespread use of AI for assistance in education, research, and writing are increasing the likelihood that unreliable data and artificial intelligence hallucinations could cause public misunderstandings about the Holocaust, even inadvertent ones. AI programs whose understanding of the world is based on relatively narrow sources can return incomplete or misleading responses when asked about the Holocaust. Just imagine, I had a real axe to grind with our local school district over the use of the boy in the striped pajamas as a reading resource. Imagine if fictional narratives written by non-Jews, unrelated to Jews, was telling the story of the Holocaust to train AI. But you also have to worry about hate groups, non-state and state actors intentionally using AI to generate content that cast doubt on the Holocaust. Deep fake images that look real, but call into the credibility the documentation of Holocaust atrocities. You can interact with simulations of Hitler or Himmler or others. And worse, we're already seeing deepfake technology used in the information war against Israel at present. Sometimes it's easily identified tactics, like appropriating images from the Syrian civil war and claiming it's Gaza. And we use AI to partially identify those, so it goes both ways. But this could scale to manufacture evidence against Jews in Israel. Imagine a modern blood libel armed with deepfake imagery and AI. That's the nightmare scenario. And that's what's contained in the report published in just last month, well, actually 2 months ago now, by UNESCO and the World Jewish Congress. And I recommend you read that. I have links. I'll share this PowerPoint if you're interested at the end. It's terrifying. But the good stuff. So, I like cows. AI and shechita. AI is already being used to monitor the treatment and conditions of animals in slaughter in the Netherlands and parts of the US. It can be trained to catch fevers or wounds on animals prior to slaughter based off of physical conditions and behaviors. AI can also monitor for life post-cut. It could guide robots to slaughter more efficiently than a shochet could. Whether or not the Orthodox Union or any other certifying slaughter supervisors would have any interest in adopting that, I don't know. But imagine AI-based GLOT, using machines to check the lungs post-slaughter. I mean, it could be more precise than the human eye for that like inflation test. But, say we could optimize slaughter by analyzing data collected post-slaughter. So we could maximize feeding regimens for ideal muscle composition and maximum meat yield. For a vegetarian like me, I gave up on Aaron's Best and Rubashkin meats years ago because of the Postville dust up. I care about Tsar Balei Chaim, the suffering of living creatures, as should we all. But to me, corporate agriculture is just incompatible with the ethics of kashrut. But this technology could take corporate agriculture to a state where efficiencies make it closer to the on-demand nature of the neighborhood butcher back in the day. That's probably a pipe dream. But one other area where AI shows considerable potential is the potential for lab cultured meat. Right now, this is an extremely inefficient process, but AI is being used to build these databases of the chemical composition of alternative proteins, which I just as an aside, I find it weird when you go to a restaurant and they offer on the menu, you know, list of proteins. It just sounds kind of gross, but I mean, that's who we are. If you think about Star Trek replicators, where food is pre-programmed and synthesized, probably based on like quantized food, it holds exciting potential as we deal with looming climate shortages. Optimistically, it would bring us closer to a post-need society. There was a great episode of the show called The Orville, where they had like that Star Trek replicator technology, and it helps take a society from greed and to post-need. And it's a cool idea. And it's not like you say tea Earl Grey hot and it just materializes in front of you. It's more like 3D printing. You'd be 3D printing food. But that, I mean, that could bring us so close to a post-need society. But therein lies the quandary. And it's almost always is. These technologies stand to benefit the already privileged versus the marginalized. As Jews, I wonder if we should push for these technologies to benefit the widest swath of humanity possible. Food production is going to be a significant problem for the developing world as climate change really increases. AI-driven food technologies, which can maximize yield of regional agriculture, they can save lives. If the technology is only reserved under a capitalist system, do we have a duty to see it made available at scale to the people damaged by the excesses of the industrialized world? I don't know. I just like to throw these things out there. AI, digital intrusion, and human dignity. Balaam, when surveying the Hebrew encampment, says, Ma tovu alecha Yaakov. And according to Talmud and Bava Batra 60a, he was cheering because the Israelites' tents were pitched at angles so no one could look into one tent from another. It expounds more on this in great detail, mostly centering on common courtyards, but we can apply it here because of Hezek Riyah, or damage caused by looking. Jewish ethics don't allow for unlimited digital insight into our lives. We saw that in the creation story and Bereshit, the unwanted gaze that prompts Adam and Eve to grab the fig leaves, or Noah's son does the peeking. We think digital surveillance, which at this point is deemed to be passive when millions of algorithms are executed at your coming and going in front of a camera, we think that passes muster. It's terrifying. In my hometown, rather than the government running our surveillance systems, an unregulated nonprofit was formed to use this, and it has AI features in these cameras. But your searches on the internet, your mobile device use, all of these things are also surveilled. And your healthcare data and portions thereof may be shared on state and private health information exchanges, HIPAA notwithstanding. AI's unregulated consumption of otherwise private details of our lives should concern us as Jews and as humans on the merits of human dignity. We have so many battles to fight in this day and age, but to my mind, this one with AI represents the most lasting damage, especially to marginalized communities. The astonishing lack of regulatory constraints on the amount of data that's stored on all of us should be as or more urgent to us than climate change or reproductive freedom, because it has direct correlations to both. So I like to end this with a call to action. A few months ago at work, we demonstrated a cool new AI capability at an all-staff meeting. We were able to take a patient's diagnostic history and build out a narrative using artificial intelligence of why they were at risk for chronic kidney disease. It piggybacks off an earlier effort to take their charts and summarize them in an easily digestible narrative summary. So we're using this generated narrative now for marketing purposes. Our job is to sell services. We make no bones about it, but we care about patients, and we really do, but we still have a profit motive. At the pace we're doing this is astounding. And it's amazing because I can take your medical charts and I could probably safely predict when you'll start noticing CKD symptoms. It's terrifying because that data lives in databases over which you have no control. What happens, for instance, if you opted in with 23andMe for medical diagnostic reporting? 23andMe stock recently tanked. And we have no law against foreign investors coming in and snapping that up. And if you don't think that data could be weaponized, realize that all of us with Ashkenazi ancestry who used 23andMe had our data leaked a year ago, identifying us genetically as Jews. You know, our concerns here have precedent with like the Nuremberg laws. Yeah, it's terrifying. When I was purely just an engineer, I didn't spend a lot of time on the ethics of this unless it was glaringly obvious that my work invited ethical or moral questions. Being a Jew, especially one pursuing ordination, to me means that we have an obligation to always be very intentional and considered in our approach to anything which carries implications for human dignity or even the preservation of life. I mean, we're in the middle of a very critical election year. And we're going to hear a lot of stuff about, you know, who's black, who's Indian, who's, you know, who does what with couches. I don't know. But I would challenge all of us to confront our candidates for offices at every level and demand that we modernize our regulatory approach to our digital life, from our likeness on camera to our every record that could be correlated to our financial, recreational, health, or other behaviors. And we need to consider regulatory governance over our AI training models. We really, and what scares me is that we're going to get saddled, just as we did in the 90s, with the Ted Stevens approach. The internet is a series of tubes. You know, for politicians to be in the pockets of Silicon Valley profit motive over a considered approach to this regulatory wise, we're wandering blind into both the most amazing and potentially dangerous phase of human history. And that is my goal here and forever, to make sure that anyone I can talk to is aware of both the bad and the good with AI, so you can be as intentional and considered in your approach to using it. And that is what I've got. So any questions? And let me open the Zoom here. Does anybody have any questions? Or yeah, let's see. Pull that up. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So I have some recommended reading. You know, the big one that I recommend is the UNESCO report about AI and the Holocaust. It's terrifying. Oh, how does that get turned on? That's crazy. That's artificial intelligence too, by the way. The closed captioning on this, it's pretty cool. Does anybody from the online audience have any questions? I'd see any.
How much are you worried about the paperclip? I mean, people, I mean, so some people believe that for both reasons that have to do with AI itself, but have to do with questions of cosmology, that there's a barrier between us where we are and reaching to a point in the future where we could have the sort of visibility in the universe that we don't see in any other civilization. So you have the candidates for this great filter. AI is one of those. You have philosophers. And the paperclip problem is that basically, what's the risk of AI just destroying everything? And you have philosophers today that would put that risk actually quite high, much higher than people would think, maybe 50% in the next 10 years. That AI destroys everything. And some people say, no, it's lower. It's not zero. It's not zero. But how worried are you?
I'm worried, and it goes back to the pace of adoption and how, you know, we've gotten ahead of our skis in the pace of adoption of AI. We've put a lot of very vital systems at the hands of machine learning. Even going into it, knowing what the limitations of machine learning are. Like the war game scenario comes to mind. You know, the more we automate with NORAD, the more we automate with our defense systems. But if it's even just and I'm putting on my soldier hat here for a second, the automation on the battlefield is exponentially higher than it used to be, especially with drones. We really can't predict with any decent accuracy, like what cascading failures will look like in these systems. But we know we're going to be caught by surprise by it. That's for sure. I am extremely worried about it. I don't think we're going to have like deliberate, like AI making a conscious decision to destroy us, but we're going to see more of like the kinds of failures that lead to traffic snarls. It starts with inconvenience. It starts with, you get the wrong medication. You get those, and it will just escalate from there. And we're going to see a series of cascading failures with it that we won't be able to address. So I do worry. I do worry quite a bit. But so somebody asked here, Josh asked, does credentialing have a place in the control of AI? Certified images, certified authorship, those types of checks. So that people would begin to assume that it was fake unless certified true. Yes, it does. And we're starting to see that we see digital watermarking on images. We're seeing Meta and Google are both embedding recognition of false stuff in their analysis of things that you post. A dear friend of mine the other day posted this very beautiful image that she thought was a sand sculpture on the Normandy beach, and it was wholly AI generated. And I felt so bad for her. I didn't want to tell her it was AI, but Meta did. It told her for me, so I didn't have to. But I mean, we also, there was a big movement, and it's lost a lot of steam because they tried to monetize it too quickly with the non-fungible tokens, the NFTs. That would have put unique identifiers on content, and that's thing. Somebody asked if I could make some general comments about where we are in the overall development of AI and where it may go in the next 10 to 20 years. I'll tell you, if I was a prophet, I would have invested in NVIDIA stock 10 years ago. But I missed the boat on that one. I'm generally a canny prognosticator when it comes to this stuff, but the pace of scale, I'd be scared to make a prediction 5 years out right now for fear of being wrong. I think whatever happens in 10 to 20 years, it's far going to exceed what I think will happen. Jesse Rosenblatt asks, AI offers a simplification of complex issues in many professions, law, medicine, business. While this can be extremely beneficial, it also creates shortcuts that ignore or circumvent ethical applications. From a Jewish ethics perspective, how can we balance these two often competing interests? Yeah, I can give you a great example of this. Is there's what AI lacks is experience. So you can see, like, it does a really good job radiological reads, taking DICOM imagery from PAC systems and whatnot, and reading those and giving you a diagnosis based on that rate. AI has been really good at that. But what it doesn't have is experience, and it's very difficult to train experience. I don't know how you balance it though. I mean, without regulatory oversight of these things, there's nothing that's stopping, my company from adopting this. There's nothing that's stopping a law firm from adopting it. Like LegalZoom, there's nothing that stops them from offering cut rate services modeled on AI. So I think we have an obligation to defer to humans first as much as possible, but that's just me. I could be wrong. Any other questions?
This screen available for us so we can link to give to those links?
I'll send this out. I'll put it on the website and link. I'll send it out in the email though to the congregation. Yep. All right. Well, if there are no other questions, I will thank you all for coming, and thank you for all you people online that joined. I really appreciate it. Love talking about this. If you have any questions, you can hit me up on Gmail or whatever. Thank you very much.